Point in. So the purpose of the Water-Based Management Plan Steering Committee is to help guide the development of the Cross Lake Watershed Management Plan. Although the Technical Advisory Committee has made recommendations and decisions about the technical aspects of the plan based on scientific data, the TAC met for the second time on January 19th. The steering committee should review these recommendations and decisions to determine if they make sense for management of the watershed and the restoration of Cross Lake's water quality.
Can I stop you?
Nope.
I'm sharing the screen so you guys can read it if you want instead of listening.
Well,
At
this
the
is
same
for the
time.
people that aren't.
Oh, people on phones, yeah.
So the purpose of this meeting is to provide you with the opportunity to review the data and recommendations yourself and to let us know what you think. Our hope is that you'll continue on this steering committee throughout the life of the 10-year plan and help with the 319 grant implementation projects. We do have a lot of information, as I mentioned, to present, and so we are going to try to adhere to the agenda as closely as possible so we don't get too far behind. We are also going to be recording this meeting, and we'll be able to make it available on YouTube. So you'll be able to review this at a later time if you so choose to. So that's all I have, except before we get started, I would like to have everybody else introduce themselves. Where's their names?
Oh, now, see, if I share the screen, I gotta stop sharing. That's the only way you can see everybody. Okay.
Is everybody up there?
Right, it should be, yeah, I'll scroll down.
Okay, I'm gonna haul off your name because I think it's in alphabetical order. As soon as I say your name, would you please unmute your mic? Introduce yourself and tell us a little reason why you're here. If you're a steering committee member, focal board member, or if you work for the DEP or whatever, just try to keep it brief, but let us know who's here and why you're here. So I guess the first one besides me is Cheryl.
Well, did you introduce yourself? Right. Yeah, I'm the secretary of the Friends Across Lake. I'm also the project manager for the Watershed-Based Management Plan. And this whole meeting is really about the Watershed-Based Management Plan, not anything else, because I got to get it done. So I need your input.
Okay, next would be Travis. Oh, he's skating
Hi,
away.
this is Travis Brayshaw. I'm the vice president of Friends Across Lake, and I'm at Big Rock skiing.
Carol Pearson.
Yes, Carol Pearson, Steve DeMayo. We have a camp in Cross Lake.
And you're on the steering committee, Steve is, and you're both on the board, focal board.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Randy Lagasse.
Oh, I'm Randy Lagasse. I'm with the Maine Forest Service. I'm not on the board or anything, but I partook in some of the watershed assessment last year and kind of on standby, just waiting for ask for help, and very concerned about the water quality. That's a big part of my job, is water quality, forestry related, but it's very interesting. And I read the meeting agenda, and I said, I gotta be here. I gotta attend this meeting. It looks good. So here I am.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anthony.
Yes, my name is Anthony. I'm with the Conservation District here in the St. John Valley. And I'm obviously here to attend the meeting to see what role the district can assist the Lake Association with its goals.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah. Cricket. And go ahead, Debbie, when Cricket's done, why don't you introduce yourself while you guys are up?
Okay, Cricket Bouchard here, known as the Crazy Lady of Cross Lake. Family's been on the lake for over 100 years, and that's why I want to keep involved to make sure that things go well.
Debbie Nichols. I live on the other side, over next to where Cheryl used to live, and I'm on the board, on the focal board.
And Debbie just made a big contribution to focal, and we can't thank her enough.
You're very welcome.
Jeff Dennis, you're up next. And you're muted. You're muted, Jeff.
Always forget that.
Yeah.
I'm a biologist in the Watershed Management Unit at DEP, and I've been involved a lot with the TAC and developing and reviewing the model and all that stuff.
And something else I want to say about Jeff, he was very, very involved in the phosphorus control plan for the Irving concept plan.
Yep.
Which is part of the watershed-based management plan.
Jeff is pretty high up the ladder in DEP, so he's the one that he's a go-to guy for everybody here. So, Jen Jesperson, please.
Hi, I'm Jen Jesperson. I work for Ecological Instincts, and I was hired by the County of Aroostook to serve as a consultant to assist Friends Across Lake with the management plan.
Jim Thibodeau, please. You're muted. You're muted, Jim.
That's actually the most popular
Jim?
saying of 2020.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Jim Thibodeau. I am the president of the Duck Cove Road Association. Nancy and I are year-round residents on Duck Cove Road. And I'm on the board, I think.
We're on the board, yes, Jim. Yep.
John Murphy.
Yeah, I'm John Murphy from Fort Kent, retired administrator from the university. I have a couple of camps on the St. Peter Road, and I'm on the board, and I think the steering committee.
Thank you, John. Kathy Hoppy, please.
Kathy Hoppy, I'm also with DEP. I'm out of the Northern Maine Regional Office. Started on Cross Lake 31 years ago with my first project in the county. Seems to be returning back to it.
Working at it. Ked Coffin.
I don't see Ked anymore.
Yeah,
Coffin, Regional Forester for Irving Woodlands, and glad to be here. For me, I've been with the company for 30 years or so, and it's all about sustainable forest management. Water quality is a huge part of that, and it's even more important today with all the stuff going along with the climate and everything that's going along. I won't get into the political side of it, but the real reason I'm here is because I got a lot of respect for Carol, and man, I don't want to be missing it because I'll get a licking from her, and that's not something I think I'd want. So
no, you don't.
Hey, Ted, can I ask you?
But
Go ahead.
Yes, you sure can.
Your title is Regional Forester?
Yeah.
Okay, I had district.
Whatever
forester.
you want to put down, Cheryl. Yeah, whatever you want to put down.
Whatever gets them paid the most amount of money.
No,
Okay.
I'm very glad to be here, and it's good to see some faces I haven't seen for a long time. And Kathy, please say hi to your husband. I haven't seen him for a long time.
Okay.
Okay, Ned.
Yes, so Ned Herbert Nason. I'm one of the liaisons between Friends of Cross Lake and the University of Maine at Fort Kent. My background is in environmental chemistry and toxicology. So for the most part, my role in this has been occasionally to assist with water sampling and to help with review and commenting on types of data collection and documentation of data. And I'll be likely providing some feedback on the plan that's developing.
I have one thing to say about NED and UMFK. They donated all kinds of equipment. We've been using, they bought a DO, a dissolved oxygen temperature meter. We've been using that. We actually lost one piece of their equipment last year in the lake, and we bought a new one for them so we could keep using it. And they've been just great. And NED is probably the only one here, at least I hope I'm not insulting anyone, that would fully understand and comment on all of the memos that you guys got.
Pretty technical meeting, so it's going to be hard to go through. Anyway, Linda Bacon, please.
Hi, I'm a lake biologist with Maine DEP, and I worked with the TAC on the monitoring plan, especially the in-lake monitoring plan. And I'm just listening in and here to answer any questions.
And Linda is the one who designed the Secchi blitzing. Those, Ronnie and Danielle still aren't on, but Rick, Linda's the one who set that all up and is in charge of all that stuff.
And I guess last but certainly not least is my big brother, Rick St. Peter.
Hi, you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Rick St. Peter. I am a full-time resident here at Cross Lake. And I guess I'm a member of this committee. And
Yes, I volunteer.
and one of the volunteers that does the lake monitoring with the Secchi discs every bi-weekly. And I am very, very concerned about the lake quality of this lake. It's been too long. We've been putting up with this for too long. We got to do something and do something fast.
Perfect. Did I miss anybody?
I don't think so.
I think I got everybody. Okay, I'll turn it over to Cheryl. Then
Yeah,
I'll.
I stopped sharing my screen, or did I leave it? I did. Are you guys still seeing my screen? You are, aren't you? That's the purpose there. Here's the agenda, which I'll keep going back and forth.
I'm not seeing it, Cheryl.
All right, I didn't know if I still had it up or not. I must have
Great.
stopped.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, now you can see it. Okay. So there, I'll put you guys back over here. I got 3 screens here, so once in a while I get a little confused about where everything is, so bear with me. But anyway, that's the agenda. And I'll keep coming back to that every once in a while if we get off schedule. We already are a little bit behind, but there's the purpose Kirk just talked to you about. Oh, Kirk, you're gonna have to shut it off. The project schedule is just for the rest of the time for between now and March 26, which is actually when the deadline for the 319 grant, the applications come out then. A request for applications. So we really have to have this done by March 26th. So the only things that you guys might really care about is obviously this first meeting. And then I have to get a draft. EI stands for Ecological Instincts. That's Jen and Whitney who work for that company. Then to Kathy, then to the full TAC for review. Now each of these things may not take a full week. And if it doesn't, we'll put them ahead a little bit or back in time. And then the Technical Advisory Committee is going to probably have a week to review it. And then I'm going to send it to you guys because they'll have a lot more comments than I think you guys will. So the deadline for me for that is March 12th. That's what I'm looking at. If it's sooner than that, I'll send it sooner if the schedule isn't that far out. And then we're going to have another meeting, and I tentatively put it from March 17th to 19th to discuss the final plan and to also talk about the virtual public meeting, which we have to have. And I was planning for that last week before the 26th. That will be sometime at night, maybe 6:30 to 8. People, if you've participated in any webinars, it's going to be like that. You can't talk, they won't see you, blah, that kind of thing, other than the presenters. And but they'll have a chance to ask questions and things like that. Somebody just either joined or went away. I heard a ding.
All right.
So that's the tentative schedule. So at the end of this meeting, I'd like to try to set a tentative date. I'll send out a doodle poll for the second TAC steering committee meeting sometime that week. It might be earlier than that if I get the plan done before that. So any questions on that tentative schedule? We technically have to have the plan done when we apply for any further grant money. So that's why the 26th is the deadline. Okay. Water quality monitoring, that's Jen's got a presentation, so I'll stop sharing in case that screws everything up. But anybody raise your hand if you have any questions or anything. Jen, I think it's to you.
Okay, and I just wanted to share, okay. Give me a second to get up and going here. Do you guys see my screen with this one image?
I do, Jen.
We do.
Okay. Great. Okay. So I figured since we're talking about a watershed plan today, I thought I'd start with a watershed map. So this is a map of the direct watershed of Cross Lake, which is 58 square miles of land across 8 towns or townships. The majority of that land and the lake are in the Cross Lake Township. You can kind of see the municipal boundaries here. And with the unorganized towns, you know, we have these really straight borders between the towns. So the watershed includes areas of large freshwater wetlands, which is these kind of crosshatch areas. Those represent wetlands, which are associated with the shoreline areas and then along the tributaries that drain into the lake. Upstream lakes include Burgoyne Lake, Black Lake, Daigle Pond, and then Dickey Pond here, which is the little impoundment.
Jen,
Yeah.
are you moving your mouse on the screen? Because I can't see that if we're supposed to see that.
I am, but for some reason, I don't know why you can't see it.
Oh, okay. I thought you were.
Can you move your screen or your mouse on the screen? Probably not if I'm screen sharing. Usually you can see my mouse, but for whatever reason, you're not. So I'm gonna have you see the little call out boxes that show those different lakes. The major tributaries include Dickey Brook, which is up on the east and west fork of Dickey Brook, which is here over on the northeast corner of the watershed. And then Daigle Brook, which is the western most stream that flows into Cross Lake. And then, of course, the Mud Lake Thoroughfare, which comes into the east side of Cross Lake, which drains the very large watershed of Long Lake, Mud Pond, and then McLean Stream, which I'll be showing you in another figure. So the lake itself is 2,480 acres with a maximum depth of 14 meters. I'm going to be presenting in my water quality analysis today things in meters. So just so you guys know, 14 meters is about 46 feet deep, and the mean depth is 5.8 meters, which is about 19 feet. So in the bathymetric map on the right here, the pink areas actually represent the deepest areas of the lake, with the deep hole on the southeast corner of the lake. And just to kind of give you an aerial view of the watershed, you know that there's quite a bit of agriculture in the watershed. We also have quite a bit of active forestry on Irving lands. There's roads that crisscross back and forth through the watershed, and there's pretty dense residential development along the shoreline of the lake. And one of the reasons I'm telling you this is because the Cross Lake is on Maine DEP's list of impaired lakes because it's not meeting standards, water quality standards, due to excessive amounts of phosphorus, which is a pollutant of concern, stemming largely from soil erosion and stormwater runoff. So how we manage and control stormwater runoff is imperative for improving water quality, and it will be a key element of the actions that are recommended in the 10-year watershed management plan. So lakes are on a spectrum from very clear lakes to what we might call pea soup, lakes that have regular persistent algal blooms. And the lakes that are on the, I'm gonna move everyone's face is kind of in my screen here. The lakes that are more clear have low nutrients, low levels of phosphorus, typically cooler water temperatures and cold water fish, not considered very productive, have low levels of plant growth, compared to the other end of the spectrum where we have high nutrients, warmer water temperatures, and typically lots more vegetative growth because there's more nutrients there. And sometimes they're actually even shallower water and also warm water fish. So this is kind of that big spectrum of the trophic states, the productivity of lakes. And then somewhere in the middle, we have Cross Lake. So just to give, I'm going to be talking about phosphorus quite a bit in this section of this meeting. And so to give you a perspective on what parts per billion means, 10 parts per billion is typically where we might start seeing evidence of small amounts of algae in a lake, maybe localized along the shorelines or windblown that kind of shows up, kind of what you guys might have been seeing in the last few years, early on in the season before it goes to a bigger bloom. So 10 ppb is kind of that. Lower than that, you're probably not having much of any kind of blooms, and then higher than that, you start having an increased probability of blooms and larger concentrations of those blooms. Cross Lake currently is at 17 parts per billion. That's an average based on the last 4 years of data. You guys are kind of on the edge of the, right in the middle, heading towards pea soup. So all of the management strategies that are coming and going into the management plan are really to move you back towards that, the clear lake. So push that phosphorus level down so that the probability of having blooms is much lower. So I'm going to be presenting the results of the water quality assessment and the watershed modeling work that we did as part of the project. And really the goals of this work were to assess the current water quality conditions and evaluate the long-term trends in the data. Where through the modeling, we want to understand the sources of phosphorus in the watershed. So where is all the phosphorus coming from? And then use the information to set a reasonable water quality goal for the management plan. So updating the current goal to one that is meets the needs of the next 10 years to improve water quality. So we used 32 years of data collected over a 40-year period from Station 1, which you can see now where Station 1 is located. That is the deep hole in the lake. And the data that we used was typically, the majority of the data was collected between May and October, which is called the open water season. With some exceptions, there were some samples collected outside that period, but we did not use anything outside of May to October for this analysis. Now this chart, can you see my mouse now or no, Cheryl? Okay, well, we'll just go with what we have. So there was some other data that was collected at Station 2 and 3, but the data was so minimal as we stuck to Station 1. And so what you can see is at Station 1, there are a number of different parameters that were collected. So Secchi disk transparency, phosphorus, chlorophyll, dissolved oxygen. These are the things I'll be going over with you today. We also looked at color, alkalinity, pH to see if there were any trends in that data, but primarily we'll be presenting this information. The white boxes that are empty indicates years that there was no data for that parameter. And then you can see that in between 2010 and 2015, there's absolutely no data collected at all at any of the stations. So typically when we do a water quality analysis, we'll do statistical analysis on the long-term data set, but then we'll also compare the historical data set to the most recent 10 years. But in this case, we were not able to do that because there wasn't enough data in the last 10 years because of this data gap to do that. So this is really, as part of the management plan, the monitoring recommendations will be to continue conducting your baseline monitoring so that you'll have an adequate data set for the last 10 years to be able to look at the short-term, more recent trends in the data.
And Jen, I just want to interject because I think especially a few people here know him. Ray Martin was collecting that Secchi disk data prior to when he passed away, and nobody picked it up. Kirk and I were here, we would have done it. I didn't even know anybody was doing it at the time, but just that's part of the reason there's that big gap there.
Okay. So the water quality analysis focused on 3 primary trophic state indicators. So trophic state is that scale I showed you from low productivity to high productivity. And these include Secchi disk transparency, which is water clarity, total phosphorus, which is the amount of organic and inorganic phosphorus in the water, which is collected using an epilymnetic core. So in this image, you can see the different zones of the epilimnion, therocline, hypolimnion. The water for total phosphorus and chlorophyll A are collected in the epilimnion, so the area where the most sunlight penetrates, there's nutrients available for algae. That's where those samples are collected. The dissolved oxygen profiles are collected from top to bottom, and they go through all layers of the water column. Tells us how much oxygen is in the lake from top to bottom. And then typically we want those concentrations are measured in parts per million to be above 2 parts per million, because at that point, that's where there's not enough oxygen for fish to survive. And 5 parts per million is kind of the next level of cutoff for reproduction of cold water fish. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about when I say something is 2 parts per million or 10 parts per million, it gives you perspective. So the first graph I'm going to show you, I'll just get you acquainted with what these graphs are going to look like. The first one is water clarity as measured with the Secchi disc. So this is Secchi disc transparency. The clearer the water is, the lower that Secchi disc goes down into the water column. On the left axis is the depth below the surface. So imagine at the top of this is a boat and you're looking down into the water. So those blue bars are going straight down into the water. And I'm presenting to you the annual average of readings collected in any given year from 1981 to 2020. And again, you can see that data gap between 2010 and 2015. So the red line is the 2 parts 2 meter line. So DP uses 2 meters. Did somebody ask a question?
Yeah, it says minimum water clarity.
Yeah, sorry, it is minimum water clarity.
Okay.
It's the minimum annual water clarity. So the shallowest readings of that year. And why that's why we're looking at minimum as opposed to some of the other graphs we prepared for the analysis is that when the minimum is below 2 meters, you'll typically have an algal bloom. It means that the water is not very clear. So you can see that across the range of years, 15 out of the 31 years that were monitored were below 2 meters. That says that, there's blooms happening pretty frequently in these years with these smaller bars that are above this red line. But looking at the overall data set, it ranged from 0.9 meters, so less than a meter, to 5 meters, which is actually quite deep of a reading. And of course, the time of year that you collect that data is also important because the summer, the water may be less clear than, say, in the spring or the fall. So this is another way to look at this data. So now we've flipped the axis. So now your boat's at the bottom. And so the depth goes from the bottom and it gets deeper as you go up on the figure. And it's showing you the average annual, not minimum, across every year from 1981 to 2020. And you can see that this line appears to be increasing, right? So it's getting deeper over time. And in fact, statistically, there is an increase in depth over time, which means that there is some type of improvement in the average annual water clarity in Cross Lake. So this is the kind of pat on the back moment for you guys that are in the watershed doing work, that at this point, we think maybe there's some of the work that you've been doing may be showing up in the water quality data. We're not certain, it could be some other factors, but this is a good sign. And this is a really good way and a simple way to track changes in water quality over the next 10 years. If anybody has a question at all, just please speak up before I move on.
Jen, I just had a question back on your last slide. It's Ken Coffin. I just had a question on your last slide. What was 1984?
Oh, 1984, sorry, I didn't mention it. 1984 was the low end of that range, the 0.9 meters.
Okay.
And then 2018 was the year that had the deepest reading, 5 meters.
then your deepest reading is 1994. Am I looking at that?
Yeah, so
right?
this is minimum, Cheryl.
Oh,
So this isn't
okay.
showing you like all data. So
get it.
the 5 meters isn't showing up on here because in that year there were shallower readings. That makes sense.
Oh, I think Ked was asking, there was must have been a bigger
Must have been a
algae.
bloom. Yeah.
Yeah, this, if you look at all the other parameters, there's definitely the 80s, there was high phosphorus, low Secchi. It wasn't just 1 year, it kind of was the 80s. It may have been before crop rotations or, you know, just a different management of the watershed possibly. It could have been related to large scale forestry activities during that time. I mean, there could be a whole bunch of factors.
Well, the St. Agat wastewater treatment plant discharge was still going to the lake at the time, and Sinclair had not been built.
Okay, so there's something.
Those are two load potentials.
Yeah, and I'm also just a little bit curious about whether you've looked at all at precipitation or temperature data. I'm be curious to see how those line up as far as disentangling what is a watershed-based load versus something that's contributed to by temperature or precipitation.
Yes, I will show you a precipitation graph in a moment, a bit later here. And then temperature, we didn't look at too in-depthly. So that's something that could be a UMFK student project maybe.
I'll keep that in mind and pass it on to some students.
It could be because I mean, temperature is something that we've noticed just in plant phenology over the last 10 years. Things have changed. And with the temperature, and we equate a lot of that to some of the phenology things that we see going on in the forest. So anyways, and that's a good question.
Yeah, my guess would be that if temperatures were warming, we might see this going the other direction. Because the algae would be happier, the open water season would be longer, so you'd have more opportunity for the algae to be growing.
Right.
Yeah, that would be my general speculation too. I think the real point of curiosity to me is really on a year-to-year variation to see where those year-to-year changes line up with those other dynamics. So thank you.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about trophic state, and here we are again with our scale from unproductive to productive. Trophic state index, or TSI, is something that DEP can calculate based on these parameters: water clarity, chlorophyll, phosphorus. So we had enough data, DEP had enough data to calculate TSI using the Secchi discs measurements that were collected over that time period. The last reading was from 2007, which means that there probably wasn't enough data collected during this gap year, those gaps that I showed you, to calculate a TSI. But overall average for the data that is available with enough years with data shows that Cross Lake is in fact considered a productive lake because the number is over 61, which is kind of the threshold that they use for the TSI categories. So next up is the chlorophyll A. So chlorophyll A is a measure of the green pigment in plants. And this is the second trophic state indicator. Typically, highest levels of chlorophyll A in Cross Lake occur in late August when water temperature is warmed up for a couple months and the nutrients and sunlight are readily available for the algae to thrive. So this figure shows the average annual chlorophyll A and the maximum chlorophyll A for each year, which is in the dark green. So average is light green and then the dark green. So again, here's this 84 is a spike. We saw also in 86 a big spike in chlorophyll. You can see elevated maximum chlorophyll through the 90s, and then it kind of goes up and down. This is the most recent data that we have. It looks like in 2019 there was a high reading that may have been related to an algal bloom that you were having at that time. So the average for Cross Lake is 10 parts per billion. The range has been from 2 to 53 over the 23 years of data that we have. 2 parts per billion was actually really low, and that was 89. Let's see here, and 2019. Let's see, it's hard to see in here, but oh, that's average. So okay, so this isn't showing it because 2 ppb was one of the readings in those years, and then the highest was in 1986. So in terms of parts per billion for chlorophyll, typically 8 parts per billion or higher gives you a high probability of having an algal bloom. So if we can bring phosphorus levels down, it's likely and very highly likely that you're going to also bring the chlorophyll levels down because the algae are feeding on the phosphorus. And then total phosphorus, again, here we have the quantity of phosphorus on this axis, the left axis here, and then the dates across the bottom with the larger gap between 2000 and 2015. 17 years of data. The range in data was from 6 parts per billion, which is quite low, to 30 parts per billion, which is quite high. That's getting even to the pea soup sort of, where you'd probably see it that the whole lake would probably have a green tinge to it. The historical average, so across all of these data, is 16 parts per billion. And then the last 4 years average is 17 parts per billion. And then for comparison, the statewide average is 12 parts per billion. There was no significant trend in either the chlorophyll or the phosphorus data. And then dissolved oxygen. So dissolved oxygen profiles aren't only nice to look at, they're kind of pretty, but they give us an idea of what the conditions look like below the surface of the water for the entire open water season. So Cheryl and Kirk are going out and they drop the DO meter 1 meter at a time and record a reading all the way to the bottom for both temperature and dissolved oxygen. And the different lines on this graph show you how much oxygen is available at those different depths. So see how some of these lines are really straight, whereas some of them are kind of curvy. The straight lines tell us that the lake is well mixed and the oxygen concentrations are pretty much the same from the top to the bottom. These typically occur in the spring, in the fall, when the lake mixes. The ones that kind of come down and slowly taper off, those are early spring, like early June profiles when the lake is just starting to stratify into those epilimnion, metalimnion, hypolimnion categories. And then you can see at some point in July and August, all of a sudden the oxygen levels just like plummet. It goes from 9 parts per million to pretty much 1 to 0 parts per million. So these areas below this red line on the left side, this is saying that there's no oxygen at the bottom of the lake at this time of year. So nothing's really living down there. And there's also a chemical reaction that can happen when there's no oxygen at the bottom, in which case all the sediment that's built up at the bottom of the lake can release more phosphorus, or release phosphorus from the sediments and into the water column, which will also help fuel algal blooms if it gets high enough up into the water column. Any questions on any of this? Okay. So the internal loading is what I just mentioned, the release of phosphorus from the sediments and into the water column. So this was looked at in pretty much a lot of detail. It's a whole nother memo if you're interested in reading it. This graph was created by Amanda Pratt at DEP. So taking the oxygen profiles and the phosphorus data that have been collected by our friends at Cross Lake, you can see the little Secchi readings for 2020 by the date. This tells us how much phosphorus is in each kind of depth range within the lake. So this big blue area represents the surface waters of the lake. This is, let me see if she has a by depth. No, this is mass. Okay, the green,
yes.
It's 0 to 3 meters is this section of phosphorus mass, and then 3 to 6 is the light green, and then 6 to 9, and then 9 to 12 the orange, and then the 12 to 14 is the green. But what this is showing us is that the phosphorus load at the bottom of the lake is not as important in Cross Lake as the surface mass of phosphorus, which means that we think that then a lot of the phosphorus is coming in from the watershed and not from the sediments. That's what it's telling us.
And can I just make a couple comments? Two things, so people know that some of the things, I'm unmuted.
No, but Jeff's got a question.
Oh, Jeff, sorry, Jeff. The part of the reason this could be done pretty accurately was because of the bathymetric survey that Hillary Snook from EPA did in 2019 with the help of Ned and Rodney and Danielle, if they come in, and some students and other DP, other focal volunteers, and Kathy was there. And the other thing was she also used so importantly was all of our DO and temp profiles and SecuDis. I am sorry, our total phosphorus measurements that we took every other meter.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff has his
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yep.
So people understand, this is a plot of the mass of phosphorus that's in those different layers of lake water. And it doesn't mean that the phosphorus concentration is highest in the blue area, because the mass is concentration times volume. And the volume of the top 3 meters is much bigger than the volume of the 3 to 6 meters, which is much bigger than the volume of the 6 to 9 meters, etc. So it's not, you don't want to confuse it with concentration. That's what we're saying. But having this graph helps us track how phosphorus might be moving between different layers, and gets a better handle on the real amount of phosphorus in the lake at any one time too, than just using concentration.
That's a really good point. Thank you for making that, Jeff. Okay, any other questions?
Jen, I think I interrupted you that you, at your bottom of that previous slide was that internal loading is not, I interrupted you, and basically this shows it doesn't come up from the bottom, right?
Right.
Primarily.
Yeah, I guess I would make the point that right now, internal loading is not a problem. That doesn't mean that in the future it couldn't be. So if there was, significant changes in the amount of oxygen at the bottom of the lake where we're having a lot of anoxia, or, a lot more phosphorus coming into the lake, this situation could change. So it's not, it's a moving target. We also looked at annual rain and snow totals from the Fort Kent weather station. And what we found was that both rain and snowfall have increased, statistically significant increase over since 1980 to 2020. So that definitely plays into water quality. If you're having, depends on how the rain falls, I guess. If you're having like a drought like last year, but when you do get rain, it's heavy, intense rainfall, like several inches of rain can cause a lot more damage than if you're just getting consistently higher, smaller rainstorm events. So tracking rainfall and how the rainfall, the intensity of rainfall might be something that's useful for the future and related to what you're seeing in the water quality data. And then I guess I'll stop there, Cheryl, and then turn over to you.
I better unmute then. And it still says okay, good, thank you. So we're already a little behind, but that's okay. I knew what was going to happen. The monitoring results for 20 2019 and 2020. I'm gonna just show a few things and then if Patrick is on, Linda would let me know. He made some maps. They're looking at the SECI, Patrick Lynn from DEP. They're looking at the SECI disc data from all the SECI Blitz stations that we did the last 2 years. And by the way, they do want us to keep doing that. If he comes back, if he's got that, I'll have him share it. So can you see my screen now? That's the last thing I showed. Yeah, yes, I see people shaking their head, yes. Okay, this, just so you know, the last 2 years, 2019, 2020, we're gonna continue in 2021. Linda Bacon, who's on, been very impressed with the data that everybody's collected that has been volunteering. And we have 12 stations around the lake. Just to clarify, Kirk and I do that DO temperature profile down at Station 1. Can you see my mouse? Can you guys see my mouse? Yes, okay. And Station 3 up here, see in the north end of the lake. So Station 1 and Station 3. And we also take the chlorophyll, which I had Jen go first so she could explain why we're taking these. We take the chlorophyll samples there and the total phosphorus samples there. Those 2 stations, that's the only stations that's done. The rest of these stations in green here, A through J, are all SECI disc stations. So we call it a SECI Blitz. So we go out all at the same time, the same day, doesn't have to be the same time, between 9 and 3 and take SECI disc measurements. So they've been using that to do quite a bit of analysis on the lake. Anybody have questions on that? No? Okay. So other than that, these are some of the graphs that Patrick has. If he's on, Linda, I don't know. I'll go on if.
Wait a minute. So Patrick is not on, but I believe these are maps. I mean, these graphs Jeremy made. I do have some maps, preliminary maps to show after you go through Jeremy's work.
Okay, that'd be great. So this is all I'm gonna go really fast. These are just the events. And these are all the different, like I said, we do 1 and 3, and we got other volunteers, Rick and Al Voisin, and the Deshanes and the Harveys do these. And then there's A through J, and that shows their readings throughout the season. This is 2020, all 2020. And then he did a Venn diagram, which shows some trending. I'm not going to get into the trending. It's a little technical, but there's some trends. And he was, in case we wanted to cut down on the number of stations, they were looking at which ones we might want to monitor. But I told him you guys would do the guys that are doing it would keep doing all the stations they're doing. So we're gonna, and then the trends are concentrated in the South Lake, that these are ones that go up and down throughout the season. The North Lake, which is blue, although Station H followed that trend, those are ones that go down throughout the season consistently. Of course, the north end of the lake where Dickey and Dago Brook come in. And then the mid-lake trend was, geez, Linda, I don't remember. Did I say that? I don't have it in front of me. Do you remember what his trends were? I got it on his email. I can
roll up one slide.
Yeah, it shows in the previous slide.
Oh, it does. Okay, I'm sorry.
So.
No.
Yeah, on the left there.
Right there. It's so small, you can't really see it.
Trend 1 goes up and
like it's clearest at the beginning of the year, and then transparencies decrease.
I do have it somewhere. I did write it down. Anyway, so you get the idea that there's some trends that they're working on. And if you want to show Patrick's, I can stop. No, these are Jeremy's. If she wants to show Patrick's, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, and I'll try to figure out how to share mine. How do I share it?
Down at the bottom should say share screen, and then you have to pick the screen, what you want to show. Nope, there, she's got it.
Can you see?
Yep, yeah, we can see your mouse too. We can see your mouse too.
So there's a lot of little maps of the lake, and each map is showing the data that was collected at the date, on the date at the top of each little map. And you can see over to the left-hand upper corner, there's a scale of transparency readings. Red is the shallowest. You only have one real red one, and blue being the clearest. And if you kind of look at the maps across, you can see how the trend changes. You can see where the clear stations are. Then things clear up a little bit there, but get a little worse down at the bottom. I will send you a copy of this, and he's cleaning it up and putting it in a PowerPoint, and is going to try to put isobars on there so you can actually see the trend a little more easily, as opposed to looking at these little tiny dots. But toward the end of the season, everything in the lake was pretty much middle of the road as transparency was concerned. The worst reading was definitely up by that Dickey Brook site in early October.
I have a quick question. I think I heard Cheryl say that one of her volunteers had a Secchi that hit bottom at one point. I wondered, are the differences in depths, like how do you account for that? Are some of the depths?
My understanding is that that person moved off the exact site by just a little bit, enough so that he could get a reading without hitting the bottom. And we counted that reading as being part of that site because it was only 100 feet from the original site.
But are all of the sites at least 5 meters deep?
They should be. None of these points bottomed out.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, if a site's only 3 meters to begin with, and it's, you know, a 3 meter deep reading, you're only getting like a green versus a blue, but it's actually like clear from top to bottom.
The sites were chosen so that the transparencies obtained would not, the Secchi disc would not bottom out. That was intentional in the picking of them. One of the sites that, you know, the depth maps were the depth maps that Hillary generated, and water levels fluctuate. So there was one site where the disc bottomed out, and we ended up having to adjust that. And there may have been another site this past year that happened on. So the person moved to a deeper spot nearby for the reading. So none of these points bottomed out.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing.
It's actually Station D, and it was Rick, so he can tell you that. And I just pulled up the, oh, somebody's chatting with me. Who's chatting with me? Oh, we're chatting with.
Cheryl?
Yeah?
You hear me? Can you
Yeah.
hear me, Cheryl?
Yes.
Yeah, we changed that location there at that twice, I believe.
Yes.
Because the water level kept dropping and the Secchi disc keep hitting the bottom. And we finally got to a point where we seem to have it now. I think we're golden right there.
Rick's right. I can show you. I'll share, because that's actually the next thing I was going to do. I'll share my screen, which is the readings from 2019 and 2020. Can you see the 2019? This is 2019 Secchi data. And that's when they hit bottom last year, 2019, when they hit bottom in 2019. And I think I have to stop sharing to, oh no, I can switch screens. Yeah, I figured that this is all kind of new share, screen 2. Is that the right one? No, that's 2019. Hold on. Maybe I can just switch. I'm sorry, this is such a pain in the neck. Can you see 2020 now? That's a different, yes, okay, thank you. This is so they did hit bottom in Station D here 2 times. And actually, this is Station H we hit bottom this year. It was a drought year. And Rick doesn't do Station H. Do you, Rick? No, that's the Deshanes. So anyway, Jen, does that answer your question? So some of them, we did hit bottom at close to 4 meters. They're not all 5 meters. These are the only 2 stations we've ever hit bottom at. And D is right outside of the thoroughfare. So it's where the Mud Lake thoroughfare comes in.
That does answer my question. I guess my point was that if you go to a 5, but the depth is less than 5, then what you're presenting as the quality of the water there might not actually be accurate, because it's actually still good there because it's getting to the bottom. So it should be blue, but it's not because of the way the increments are set up.
Okay, so we went over that. There's some other data that was collected in 2020. Hold on a minute. I want to make sure I'm not somewhere else where I'm supposed to be. Screen 2. No, I can just keep it on screen 2, I think. Let me know if this doesn't work. Those I didn't actually talk to you guys at all about the lab results, but pretty much I think you understand that now, that we're taking chlorophyll results and we're taking phosphorus samples. We're doing something a little different in 2021, which I'll talk about in a minute, based on Linda's recommendations. So that's the next thing for me. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Kathy, do you have anything about the Dickey Brook Sonds and anything else, Kathy? Kathy put Sonds in Dickey Brook this summer.
Let me see if I can find share. Okay. So I'm hoping you guys can see that.
Yes.
Okay, so Cheryl asked me to bring up also the biomonitoring data results. And so I'll just quickly go through. Those who don't know, we sample wetlands and streams through our biological monitoring unit. And currently we measure macroinvertebrates, the bugs who live in the bottom of the stream. So it'd be like your stoneflies, your caddisflies, are the ones you're probably most familiar with. Oh, and black flies you're very familiar with. And we also look at the algae. So for the wetlands in the watershed, so we didn't just look at the in-lake stuff, we also looked at what's going on in the water bodies that contribute to Cross Lake. So the wetlands in the Cross Lake watershed, we looked at 5 of them. Some of them we looked at in 2019, 2014, and then 2019. This is a statutory class that can you see my mouse? Good. So this is what they are, the statutory class and what they're supposed to be. And then after our data collection, we run it through a model, and this is what they turned out to be. And so we have these 4 data collections, they're from 2 water bodies, show that it's not attaining its class, so they're impaired. So Daigle Pond West and Germain Lake both are impaired for macroinvertebrates. And the wetlands, we also looked at the algae, and again, it's the same water bodies, same years, and we have more impairment on the algae. And this is really common in Aroostook County to see that the bugs are happy and the algae isn't. And that's because the algae seems more sensitive to the nutrient loading that happens from our agricultural runoff than the bugs are. And we also looked at Dickey Brook itself. Over a number of years, it's a statutory class B. Determination for all the bug samples was B, so it attains its class. And again, this is typically what I see anywhere in the county. The bugs will attain class, but when we look at the algae, we'll see it's more sensitive to nutrient loading and farm runoff that we have up here in the county. Yes.
Kathy, you're talking about not the kind of algae that we want in the lake, right?
Right, we're talking about benthic algae, stuff that's stuck on the rocks that grows on the bottom. But they all feed off the same thing, nutrients, phosphorus. We currently have a proposed nutrient criteria. This isn't in law yet. And this is what's proposed for the nutrient criteria. Looking just at the phosphorus levels that we've collected on Dickey Brook. Dickey Brook in 2009 had a phosphorus grab sample of 62, and in 2014 it had a grab sample of 43. And this is a class B, so it exceeds this value, and it would require us to go through this modeling effort to determine whether it's non-attainment. So that's a possibility down the road, that it may be listed for non-attainment for nutrient criteria. But the biggest thing to realize here is we have data that shows that the tributaries to Cross Lake have a nutrient problem and a water quality problem. It's not a surprise, but we've got proof that there's stuff going on in the watershed. This is a picture of my Dickey Brook SON site, and it's also where we collect the biological data on Dickey Brook. It's right above Route 161. This was in the spring when I first deployed a sonde, and the sonde is it's basically a computer with a bunch of sensors or probes on it. And the ones that I deployed this year could measure pH, dissolved oxygen, temperature, turbidity, and specific conductance. This is my sonde in June. And you can see the water has a very murky color to it. The rocks have got lots of algae growing. I don't know what's going on in this site. It pretty much had a consistent turbidity of 20 NTUs. It never cleared up. And we didn't have storm events. I've been poking around the watershed trying to figure out where it's coming from. It's only on the southern branch, or as the west branch of Dickey Brook. If you go up the other branch up to Flat Mountain Road, it's clear. And this is my Flat Mountain Road site. It's very open. It's old field along it. You can see my sonde is right there. They stayed in the water throughout the season, but the flows got very low. And this is the upland site there on Flat Mountain Road later in the year again. And it was really disgusting and scuzzy. So what did I learn? Oh, I did put a logger out in 2019, which just measured DO and temp. And I had a lot of problems with fouling at the Route 161 site. There's a lot of tannins and lignins and sediments that move down. And I'm gonna have to make, if I do it again, I'm gonna have to go up there more often to take care of these instruments. But we could do some general, even though the data is not going to be good enough to be graded excellent or good to put into our EGAD database. We could see that we've got huge fluctuations in DO. So we have a big diurnal swing. Like I said, the turbidity at the lower site was pretty consistent at 20 NTUs, while the Flat Mountain Road site was at 0 as their background site. You could tell that at the Route 161 site, photosynthesis was driving the swings, whereas the Flat Mountain Road site, I could tell that it was a combination of temperature and the photosynthesis going on. And the pH also exhibits the impact from photosynthesis. And that's pretty much what I've got on the upland water quality monitoring.
Thank you, Kathy. And we did send samples. This I can share. I'll show you 2019, 2020. We did send samples both in 2019 and 2020 to algae samples. In 2019, we sent them from the lake. to DEP, and they got classified last year, but 2020, those 3 samples right here have not been, I don't have any results. And actually Hillary Snook at EPA is doing a study, and we took special samples and sent them to him. So I don't have those results, just so you know, we did take them. And again, he's the one who did the bathymetric survey, which you already saw the map. So I think the next thing is the future monitoring, and I'll just put that down. Can you guys see that? No, probably not. New share. Where's that? Screen 2. All right, just screen 2. I'll just keep it on screen 2. This is what Linda came up with for our sampling for next year. We're going to do not TP every other meter like we did this year. We're going to take a epilimnetic core for both phosphorus and chlorophyll, and also nitrate and TKN. I won't get into that because but there's a reason they want us to do that. Well, I can simply say when nitrate levels go low in the lake is when the cyanobacteria take over from the other bacteria, so they like that. And that's why we're gonna, I hope I said that right, guys. I'm sure Jeff and Linda and Jen will correct me if I didn't say it right. And so we're taking some of the discrete samples of profile grabs here. This is station 1 and this is station 3. So that's just quickly what we're gonna be doing this year. And here's the potential. The state lab almost doubled their prices. So here's our cost for 2021 with the parameters I just mentioned. And then Linda wants us to do color once a month, so we'll do that. There is a possibility, I don't think Jeff and Kathy are planning on having us do that, but initially I had tributary samples in here for Dickey, Daigle, and Mud Lake. We did do Mud Lake Thoroughfare, I'm sorry. We did do that last year, the Mud Lake Thoroughfare. I don't think we're gonna do that, and there's a lot of good reasons. So this is what we're looking at for the lab analysis and the costs. And is that it? Yep, that's it. So Jen, unless anybody has any questions on that, the monitoring. I know we're behind. I'm done unless anybody has questions. You guys have all that data anyway. So Jen.
You see my screen again? Okay. So I'm going to go over the modeling results now. For any of you that are interested in the full modeling results, there's a lot more than what I'm presenting today. I believe that the memo was sent out by Cheryl this morning. So you can find that in an email from Cheryl. All right, let me get you guys moved over here. So in terms of watershed modeling, this is the aspect of where we are trying to estimate where the different sources of phosphorus are coming from in the watershed. And let's see. So land cover is one of the most important things we start with when we're doing watershed modeling. And land cover is really what is on the landscape. So is it agricultural land, forestry, residential development, etc. So what we did was we updated the land cover layer and had that reviewed by a couple of the different technical advisory committee members to make sure that we had as accurate of a land cover layer as we possibly could before we get started. So you can see before and after. There's we focused primarily around the lake where there wasn't really a lot of the development showing up in the original land cover layer. And you can see these roads are showing up better than they were before. And then there are a couple areas of agriculture that got kind of switched from one type of agriculture to another, like a row crop to a hayfield or something like that. So in terms of intensity of use, the more intensive the use, the larger the water and phosphorus load coming off of that portion of the landscape. So for example, untouched forests, never been cut before, the roots are all in place. will release a lot less phosphorus than a harvested forest that was recently harvested, as would row crop export more phosphorus than, say, hayland. So these are the things that go into the model, with land cover being one of them, but precipitation, there's a whole different pile of things that go into how we determine where the phosphorus is coming from, but land cover being the primary one. So if we look at the breakdown of land cover in the watershed, which is represented by this pie chart, about a third of the watershed, you can see in light blue, is wetlands. So there's a lot of wetlands in the watershed. And the good thing about wetlands is, for the most part, they can do a good job of trapping sediments and taking up phosphorus from the plants that live in the wetlands. So those are typically wetlands are considered attenuating or taking up phosphorus, which is a good thing. 45% in the green is forest land, that's managed and unmanaged forests. And then 23% agriculture, and 3% of the land area, which is the red areas around the lake and along the roadways in the upper watershed, are development. So that's primarily houses and yards and things like that. So when we put this information into the model, it tells us what is the phosphorus load that's generated from those different land cover types. And what we find is that the smaller 23% of the land area, which is the orange agriculture, actually represents 77% of the total phosphorus load to the lake. Whereas forest land, which is the largest area of land, only accounts for 10% of the load. Wetlands 9%, and developed land 5%. So it's pointing to the fact that what we probably know just by looking at the land cover map, that agriculture has a big role in the phosphorus load in the lake.
Jen, the only thing.
Can I ask a quick question? Oh, sorry.
Yep.
I just real quick, I'm because I'm obviously the forestry side of it thinking, but the forestry contributor, are you able to break that down as to where it's coming from? Like is it mostly roads? Am I right?
No, it's so the roads, we factored in roads. So what we do for each land cover type is it's in the memo, but we have to come up with a phosphorus export coefficient for each land cover type. And
Gotcha.
So we look at the different types of forest cover types, and then we assign an export coefficient. For areas that were recently harvested or have large or wide roads, that coefficient may be higher than another
Gotcha.
area that doesn't have.
I won't tie you up.
We had lots of long discussions about this, and the word changed a couple times to account for what we thought was the most reasonable, realistic numbers within the model.
Thank you.
Can I point out one thing?
Yeah.
Even if you had a totally undisturbed forest, there is some phosphorus export that comes out of it. In other words, the lake would not be devoid of phosphorus if the whole watershed was just forest and there were no roads and nobody had ever harvested anything from it. And you'd have like three or four ppbs in the lake probably, if that was the case. So you have to put that in that context. You'd have at least 2 or 3 ppbs, I should say. And so what we're saying here is that forest it's always a background source. If it's very disturbed, it can become locally a significant source. But most of what you're seeing in that lower pie chart there for forest is probably the background part of it. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I know there's contribution, and I can think of all the contributors, right? And in my mind, I'm just thinking, well, how does roads play an impact in there? So I get your point, Jeff. There's a natural flush going on.
Yeah, it's not much, but
it's there. Yeah,
it's mostly really intense storm events that erode intermittent channels in the forest, and that happens, during big melt events and stuff like that. And that's a significant phosphorus load. If your watershed's all forested, that's where the biggest chunk of it's coming from.
You also know that the pie chart is base flow and surface runoff. So includes both sources of phosphorus coming in from under the soil and over the ground. So this is like the total phosphorus from both sources. And we would expect probably in forest setting that most of that's going to be base flow probably.
Yeah, it's great.
The only comment I had is I wanted to point out, because these people are familiar with the TMDL, the 2006 TMDL that DEP did, and actually Jen worked on, that those figures are very, very close to what the 2006 TMDL had. So it's consistent with that. If it was different, I would question it. But.
As would we. Okay, so that kind of just gives you big picture land cover. And then I also wanted to show you this larger watershed map, because I showed you a map of the direct watershed of Cross Lake, which is this colored area. But you can see that the upstream lakes, what we call indirect watersheds, have a huge contributing area. So the land cover in those watersheds also determine what the concentration of phosphorus is that's coming down through the lake, through the mud lake thoroughfare into Cross Lake. So the model accounts for additional phosphorus coming in from the upstream lakes, in addition to what's being delivered from its direct watershed. Okay. So simplifying everything, where's the phosphorus coming from? What the model is saying is that 94% of the phosphorus coming into Cross Lake is coming from watershed runoff from Cross Lake's direct watershed. 55% of the runoff from the watershed is Cross Lake, and 39% is coming from the upstream lakes. So Mud, McLean, and Long. Okay, and then the other sources of phosphorus, so atmospheric deposition. So this is phosphorus that's in the air that comes down and falls onto the surface of the water. Wildlife, mostly waterfowl. We don't have any direct discharges, thankfully. That was taken care of. Internal recycling is quite low, only 2% of the load right now. And septic systems are estimated to be about 1% of that load from development. So internal loading is not a problem right now. What the major problem is we have a big load of phosphorus coming in from the watershed. So the management plan is really saying, how can we reduce that number so that there's less coming in from the watershed? And then this is just another way of looking at that. So here's atmospheric deposition. This is phosphorus in kilograms per year, internal loading, waterfowl, septic systems, and then the watershed load. So the total load coming into the lake is 5,000 kilograms of phosphorus per year. Okay, and Kirk did some back of the envelope calculations, which we'll double check for the public meeting, but I think he equated at least like, was it 900 kilograms is about 13 dump trucks full of sediment that you'd have to get rid of take away from the watershed through erosion control and other practices. And then just one other cool feature of the model is that we can break the watershed farther down into smaller sub-drainages to determine or estimate where we think the highest load of phosphorus is coming from. And in this case, the darker areas are the higher load per area. So this is the West Fork of Dickey Brook and Daigle Brook kind of rank high. So this can help with prioritizing practices in the watershed as over the next 10 years. And then lastly, before I turn it back over to Cheryl, we, as part of this project, we have to set an in-lake water quality phosphorus target. The old target in the TMDL was 16 parts per billion. The current is 17 parts per billion. You can see on the left. And what we're suggesting that the new target should be 14 parts per billion, which would equate to about 900 kilograms per year reduction in the amount of phosphorus coming into the lake. It would improve the Secchi disc transparency reading, so the lake would become clearer. And then on the last row of this chart, see where it says percent of time chlorophyll A is less or greater than 8 parts per billion. So right now there's a 21% chance that you're going to have algal blooms at any time on the lake. With that reduction, that's going to be reduced down to about 9. You can go even lower and get down to almost no probability of having an algal bloom, but whether that's a realistic goal or not, our technical advisory committee did not think that it would be a reasonable goal based on what we think we can do in the next 10 years to reduce phosphorus. And so we're here has 4-year NWQI target 560 and 10-year target is 907. So this was, Cheryl's going to talk about this next, but the USDA NRCS put together in their National Water Quality Initiative practices they thought they could do to improve water quality on agricultural land. And in a 10-year period, they thought they could get to 900 kilograms or 2,000 pounds phosphorus reduction. So that was one of the main reasons we selected that target. And hopefully it is an achievable goal and that there will be an improvement in water quality as a result. Kirk?
Yeah, one thing everybody should know too is that the water coming in from Mud Lake has been pretty consistently around 13 parts per billion. So it's actually lower than our lake average of 17. So it's kind of helping us right now. But as of course, part of the reason that we all decided to shoot for 14 is that even if we get rid of Dickey and Daigle and all that stuff up there, we'd still be having 13 parts per billion, you know, coming in the lake. And I calculated, you guys, some of you guys probably know that I was doing some water flow readings this summer. And I very roughly came up with about 80% of the water that comes into our lake is coming in from Mud Lake Thoroughfare and the Long Lake watershed. So the rest of it comes in through Dickey and Daigle and the other little brooks that we get and springs and what have you. So, so anyway, 14 parts per billion is we think it's achievable. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some time. But unless we start working in the Long Lake watershed, it's going to be hard for us to get down below 13. That's kind of my point, I guess. So 14 is, I think, achievable, and it'll get us down below that magic number of 15. So that's what we're looking for. I think that'll put us around 11% probability, I think, Jen or Jeff or anybody.
It's 9.3, it's right there.
Oh, 9.3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
just one additional comment on that. There is a lot of agriculture in the Long Lake watershed, as you are all aware, I'm sure. But what happens with lakes is that they are actually really good treatment basins for phosphorus discharge downstream of the lake because, and particularly Long Lake, because it has a very long residence time because of its huge volume. So a lot of the phosphorus that comes into Long Lake ends up in the Long Lake sediments and never makes it downstream. So doing BMPs to address phosphorus load in what we call the direct watershed of Cross Lake, which includes Dickey and Daigle Brooks and the shoreline areas, et cetera, is much, much more effective than doing it in the Long Lake watershed. Because most of that phosphorus coming off the Long Lake watershed doesn't make it down to you guys.
Okay, I'm going to actually share my screen again. Oh, I can just click on it twice. I'm learning more about Zoom here. This is our results from 2020, and here's Mud Lake that Kirk was just talking about, Mud Lake Thoroughfare. So you can see the average was 13. That's what Kirk was saying, that the average was 13. So it would be really hard for us to get below 13. And as Jeff said, the best BMP we have or best management practice we have for the problems with Long and Mud Lake are Long and Mud Lake themselves. So we're mainly going to deal with what we've got coming into Cross Lake from our direct watershed. This is really maybe one of the most important. This is the screen Jen just showed you, and this is the 14. We actually had the technical advisory committee vote on this, and I really like their comments. And if any of you want to vote on this is one of the most important things we have to do, is try to set a load and a target for 10. Again, this is 10 years. So this is not 907 kilograms per year, as it says. It's after 10 years. Maybe we'll do it all in the first 5 years, but that's the amount we have to reduce it by. Actually, it's 900 up here, 900 kilograms per year in the total 10-year period to get to 14 parts per billion. And the reason we did pick that was specifically because of the 907 in the NWQI target, which I think is what is next. Yes, I'm next on that. So I just wanted to keep this slide in mind. This is one of the most important things, that all that work that Jen and Whitney did, and Ken Wagner from the he did the internal loading. This is one of the most important things. So if I could readily send you the link for the vote, and you can look at it if you want to do that. I'd be happy to do that. And where was I? Okay, so we talked about that. Okay, so National Water Quality Initiative. I believe almost all of you know that in 2019, the Cross Lake Watershed was chosen as a national NRCS National Water Quality Project. There's 2 in the state every year, I think, and Sheepscot River was the other one. So this is actually their contract, existing contracts for 2020. This is the amount of money that they have contracted. That actually very little of it was done in 2020. It's going to be done in 2021 because of the timing of the contracts and stuff. But anyway, that's the total of the contracts. There's going to be over 1,000 acres in cover crop. And so I have this, I think I sent it to everybody yesterday or the day before. So we have all of this information for just the 2020. And so what they did with that is they took, I'm going to show you the spreadsheet first. This spreadsheet here came right out of the assessment they did to get the project into the NWQI, get it approved by the federal NRCS. And so these are all the practices that they could do in 2020 to 2023. And they actually calculated what you might want to look at is the load reduction. See here, phosphorus and the load reductions. So I'm just going to go, it's got Dickey and Daigle Brook. That's where they're working, Dickey and Daigle Brook. That's where most of the agriculture is. And the bottom line is this is what they said in 4 years, their target. I changed it to kilograms. This is pounds, but I changed it to kilograms because that's what the model has. So 555 kilograms a year. And so the one that the same spreadsheet was used in 2020, and it's actually a quarter of their 4-year target. So if this is right, Kathy's going to look at it. I've got Jen and Whitney going to look at it too. They've actually they're doing stuff. The program is working to try to do some stuff to actually remove phosphorus from the agricultural land. You'll notice, like I said, a whole lot of this is cover crop acres. They're going to institute cover crops. There is one repair of a sediment basin that's existing, and you can look at this, and if you have any questions, let me know. But we can get this data every year to see actually what they're doing. So they'll send me a spreadsheet and I can make a table. So that's the NWQI project. The other things we did is this summer, Kirk and I spent quite a long time doing this. I looked at all the non-point source sites we identified in the 2019 survey, and I had to do some calculations that Whitney and Jen helped me with to figure out how many kilograms a year do those sites generate, okay? How many, compared to the agriculture, how much are we generating around the lake, the shoreline development and the roads and stuff? So there was actually the most amount were 101 of those shoreline erosion sites. I'm sure Carol and Steve remember all of them down on Miffs Lane and John on St. Peter Road and a whole bunch on Sear Road. So there's 101 of them. Those sites actually generate in total 4.7 kilograms a year. And the high and medium impact sites, there were 75 of those. Those are the ones on the really steep banks. They generate 4.6 kilograms a year. There were some road sites, mainly up in Fort Kent. There were two high impact road sites up in Fort Kent. Actually, they're quite near that Black Brook. They're dirt roads up there and they generate some. So those together only, even all the camp roads added in, only generate 0.8, well, 0.9 total, counting the low impact ones, 0.9 kilograms per year. And then there were a few other sites around where people had not enough vegetation or different. The public landing was one that Kathy was involved with Steve and Carol. So those sites all total 0.1. Bottom line is all told, all the NP non-point source sites that we identified in 2019 generate 5.6 kilograms per year. And so we're going to put that in. We're going to try to address those sites. And then I showed you the 555.4 for the 2023 tab for the NWQI project. They haven't calculated from 2024 to 2039 what they're going to do, but in the assessment that NRCS wrote, they actually came up with that total of 9,000 kilograms or 2,000 pounds. 900, I'm sorry. Thank you, correct me. So you can see it's a small amount that we generate compared to agriculture, if I did my calculations right, but Jen and Whitney looked at them, so I think they're pretty accurate. So that's basically counting all the non-point source sites that we identified and the agricultural sites. So hopefully we're not way off on that, but that's what we're looking at. There was a couple other little things we did. See if I can do this. Dee, can you see that? I switched the screen. Yes, good. This is Amanda Pratt at DEP, who's great. She identified the septic sensitive soils. These are with the state soil scientist who came up here for the gravel road workshop. And these area here, if we do ever want to look at septic systems, these two areas around the Mud Lake thoroughfare and up here would be where we look at. There's 83 lots there. And again, that's a minor contributing factor, but that's where we concentrate if we do get to septic systems. And I think that's it for that. Wow, pretty good. We're only 9 minutes behind. If anybody has any questions on any of that, I can try to answer them, or Jen can, or it was a lot of work. We looked at Kirk and I went to all the road sites to try to do all these calculations. It was a lot of work. I've got a spreadsheet.
Earl, I have one question about this table.
Okay.
When you're talking about the road sites and the shoreline impact, is that what you expect to be able to get for reductions, or is that what's being generated?
That's the it's the generation. Yes.
Okay. Because the numbers you have below are what you expect to be able to reduce.
Yeah,
right? So it's like, and you're really on basically, we're only probably reducing the agricultural sites by 25% or something like that. So the actual agricultural contribution is even much bigger relative to the upper ones.
Very good point, Jeff. I made this quickly, but this is generation 5.6. So that's saying we're going to remove all of that. And even if I take out, I'm trying to make it the right size so you can see it. even if I take out the, if I just take out the low impact site, it's still 5.5. So I don't know, that's kind of one of the last things we're gonna talk about is what our priority sites are for the 319 grant application and what kind of reduction. Jeff is totally right. The ag generates way more than 900 kilograms. This is the reduction. So
Cheryl? Were the feds able to get commitments on all their available funds?
no, that's a good question. No, they actually had 323,000. I'll pull that $323,000 for 2020, and the contract total amount is not 9 contracts for 93,538 for 2020.
What was the cost share?
Oh, the cost share. I think it's oh, I have it written down somewhere. Might be 75-25 or 60-40.
They do payments. NRCS does a payment fee now. They don't do cost share anymore. So they do a direct payment, and if the farmer, and if Fred's on, he can probably explain it better. But I think they went to payment schedule. You have to realize that for this contract period, it was under COVID, and the rules about going out and interfacing directly with people impacted what the NRCS staff was able to accomplish on the planning part of it. And there was also some health issues and staff shortages at the office. So I think they did pretty good given the conditions they had to work under.
So is the money that wasn't committed lost, or does it move forward?
Kathy and I talked about that with Tony. Tony Jenkins is the a state conservationist in Bangor. We had a TAC meeting and that came up, and I don't know that we got a clear answer. Kathy, do you have more? Kathy's way more knowledgeable about the ag stuff than me.
I don't know what under the COVID conditions that the requirements are with the money. In the past, because there's the other NWQI watershed in the state, they both have access to the pool of money. I don't know if they're allowed to then roll it into other equip if it didn't get spent. There was some flexibility built in last year due to COVID on a number of programs, and I don't know if it was built into theirs.
Okay. Well, I think if we could determine that, it might be helpful.
I've actually asked 2 or 3 times. I will make a note that actually came up in this meeting, and because I've wondered too and asked the same thing. What happened? Does that mean next year they'll have the excess and their allotment for 2021? I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Good question though.
You do have to remember that there's only so many farmers and there's only so much work that they can do per year, regardless of how big the pot gets. They're still running a business and farming. So
well, I guess in the early discussions anyway, there was a question about whether the farmers were going to buy in or were they going to be reluctant. So
I think you've got some of your answer right there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yep.
We're actually trying with the 319, which is the next segment, next section. I think we've covered everything. 319. I'll go to the agenda so you can see that. So we've talked about everything, I believe, up until I've been trying to keep track of where we are. So what are we going to do with all this? What we're going to do with this is I'm going to finish this plan with Jen and Kathy and Whitney and the tax help and you guys when you review it. Then at March 26th is the date where the request for applications comes out for 319 grants from DP. It's EPA money. It funnels through DP. They're actually due May 21st, the deadline. It's kind of like what we did for the grant for this watershed-based plan. We applied for grant money and we got it, and I'm sure we've spent it by the time Jen gets done with all the work she did with those memos, so. And we use some of it for the water monitoring. I didn't put near enough in the grant application because we added a bunch more parameters. I didn't know we were gonna do chlorophyll and all that. So we ended up spending quite a bit of focal money on that, on the monitoring we did in 2020, but we definitely didn't mind doing that. So Friends Across Lake has hired Ecological Instincts to help us, Jen and Whitney, on the grant application. I will do as much as I can, but they actually helped on the Watershed-Based Plan grant application too, because that's what they do for work and they're great at it. And February 10th, there's a workshop which we'll participate in. It's for that grant that they give Wendy, who you remember from the watershed survey. She runs it and she gives out information for the grant, potential grant applicants. And then we're again partnering with the county. They've already said they'd partner with us as a grant applicant. They pay all the bills. They paid Jen's bills. They paid for the water sampling as far as that went. The district, which we still really want to work with the district, who is Anthony still on, the Soil and Water Conservation District in Fort Kent. Kathy met with some of the board members a week or so ago, and they're thinking about how they're going to participate. And then the town of Fort Kent, I haven't contacted them yet, but those road sites are in Fort Kent. So we will talk to them about possibly, you know, they could get money to fix one of the sites. There's a big ditch and it's horrible. There's awful erosion. The other side of the ditch, other side of the road, they fixed. It looks great. They've hardened it with rocks, cobbles and rocks, and it looks great. So I don't know if they're planning on fixing the other side of the ditch too, but we can get money in the grant to help with that. There is a 40% match, and of course, Friends Across Lake will kick in all the time, and paper and ink and money, you know, whatever else we do, all the gas for the volunteers and all that. The camp owners themselves for the shoreline erosion sites are definitely going to have to chip in. Kedzon Irving is going to chip in. He's going to, I don't know if he's ready to tell us now how much, but he's
No, but we will. I'm on that, Cheryl.
okay.
Thank you.
I
We know
trust
you
you.
are.
I trust you, Ken. Thank you very much for all your support. And Fort Kent, again, if we help them with the road sites. Then the last thing is that non-point source priority sites. I need steering committee feedback. I don't know if we need to do a poll or anything like that. Basically, I don't see any other way to do this, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is other than to take these sites, the high and medium impact sites here, the shoreline erosion, which is obviously the worst thing we've got on the shoreline, and the road sites, and put those together, which comes out to 85 sites. And that would be the non-point source priority sites that we apply for grant money for. And ag, unless we can get the district to commit, I don't, other than outreach to the farmers, we will put money in the 319 grant application for that, because it's a very important thing. But other than that, I don't have any other.
Dwayne has indicated to me that the district would be interested in promoting multi-species cover crop on land. And so I've been talking to the Southern Aroostook District to find out how they ran that piece of it. So I've got some additional information, and we'll get back with Dwayne and probably Anthony.
So any questions about?
Yes, Cheryl, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Anthony. As far as the cover crop, I did speak to our chairman after the meeting with Kathy. His next intention is to, because he's a farmer and he knows the farmers in the watershed personally, he's going to be contacting them and seeing what their interest would be in the cover crop practice. And so that's what he's working on now to try to move that forward. So I just wanted to give that little update. I don't know if Kathy already knew that or at the meeting, but that was something that we discussed afterwards. So that's one step that he's doing there. He's trying to use his personal connections with his fellow producers to encourage more cover crop.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony.
Okay.
We also had, and just going to throw this out there, we had 7 agricultural sites identified in the watershed survey that Anthony, you know, Alex and Kelsey went out with the UMFK drone people that Peter Nelson has at UMFK, and they identified 7 sites. And I was kind of wondering if there's any chance we could possibly look at those. I don't think any of those were in that NWQI project. Kathy, I wanted to throw that out there to you. I got a little sticky note here to talk to Kathy about that. But the other problem is, just with the ag is that they do have the NWQI project and the funding for that. So we can't step on their toes with the 319. What we want to do is be supportive and helpful. That's what we want to do is. Fred's on. Kathy, you wanted to ask Fred something?
Fred, you're on, right?
Yep, I'm on.
Yeah, Kathy was looking for you a couple minutes ago to help with a question if she wants to read.
I was just saying, and Fred probably knew better than I did, whether it was, I think it's mostly payments now for EQIP dollars versus cost share.
You mean on the quality project there?
No, just basically all the rules for NWQI and EQIP are the same. So if you participate in EQIP, I think it's a straight payment now per acre, and that's not a cost share like a 75-25. It's just you get a straight payment.
If it has, it's just been changed, Kathy. Because
okay.
And when you get a project like the Valley have been approved for, they get a lot higher cost share than you would under normal circumstances. So generally, it might be 40% or 50%, and they might go up to 85% or 75% on the cost share. So it's a big benefit to have that designation in the Valley and have those extra funds designated for there. So they'll get a lot higher rate.
I can also ask about that. I'll ask what the rate is. I remember Pauline Pear is the one who wrote their assessment, which has a ton of information in it. And she actually said at one point, one of our meetings, Kathy, that she thinks it was going to be 90-10 at some point, but not for 2020. Do you remember her saying that? I've got it in the minutes somewhere, but that they would pay 90 and farmer would have to do 10.
I know for specific practices they were trying to raise it. I don't know where it's gone.
It wouldn't surprise me on that project where they've got that extra money that they would go up to that level. We've had it here at different times, but it's not the normal level.
I don't think, Fred, you didn't introduce yourself at the beginning. Do you want to
I didn't make it on the beginning.
Hey, can you tell who you are and why you're here?
I'm Fred Fewellen. I'm a seed grower in Crouseville, and I have a camp at Cross Lake, so I'm real interested in what's going on and have a little bit of knowledge. I'm on the state FSA committee, so I have a little knowledge about the funding and like that from FSA.
He's our next door neighbor, and he's a great guy.
Very helpful.
Actually, we have Flewellings on either side of us, and they're cousins, and they're both great guys.
You're surrounded.
I think that's it, other than, if you guys have any questions about the 319 grant, we actually are rushing this plan. As you can see, some of the things Jen submitted, we got yesterday, so she just barely got them done, and pushed. And I'm pushing to try to get, Kirk's doing all the cooking and cleaning, but try to get.
Cheryl, speaking about the stuff that just came out, I read the climate change stuff, and I don't know if there's any plan to do this, but I really think it would be good if we could track rainfall or storm intensity as part of, so it could be coordinated with the other data, either the Secchi disk or the phosphorus deposition. So.
That's a great thing, Steve. Is that something we can do, Jen?
Yeah, I think there's a way to do that. Kathy and Jeff might have more feedback on that, but there's definitely ways to monitor that.
I'm thinking it might be, I'm looking at Ned there, maybe something the university students set up a long-term weather station of some sort in the Cross Lake area.
Automated.
Well, it's yeah, I don't, with the students being, I don't even know what generation we're on, millennial or whatever. Yeah, they'd probably be interested, and that's probably what would hook them up best. And the growers might be able to use the data too for irrigation purposes.
If you wanted to get intensity, ideally you'd have a tipping rain gauge that would record rainfall as it occurred every minute or so. And then you'd be able to have a clear understanding of how intense an event was, as opposed to, some of your thunderstorms that roll through the air drop, an inch in 7 minutes. And then you have, a system that goes through and only drops a half an inch in 24 hours. And it's nice to be able to distinguish that. And it makes a huge difference what happens on the ground. So if you're going to invest, if you're going to invest in a rain station and somebody to monitor it, it might be worth automating it with a tipping rain gauge. That would be really neat to have. And it would be great information, not just for you guys, but for the whole county too.
I just want to quick respond to that. So in short, the answer is I think that's a great idea. I'm going to have to give a little bit of thought to how we're going to fund that. And if that's something that we can wrap, at least purchase the equipment, if that's something we can wrap into one of the other grants, then I think it's very reasonable for UMFK to take an administrative role in that. Right now, I don't have a lot of time capacity to apply for additional grants, but again, I'm happy to work with folks to and again, that has something like a weather station is going to be useful for supplying data for a number of our classes in the environmental studies program in the future.
Is that something we could put in the 319 grant? Is Jen shaking her head? Yes.
I thought you were going to say in the action plan.
Yeah, in the action plan for sure, but is that, I know we can't put monitoring in the 319 grant, but.
It would be tricky.
Tricky?
So yeah.
I would look to another like private foundation. There's several in Maine that might be interested. I can give you their contact information.
And I think that would be great. And again, if it ends up being something that's interrelated but separate from exactly what Kirk and Cheryl are doing, but it's a small grant, I would be able to find the time to apply for that. If it's something bigger, then we want to work together on it. The other, I'll mention to the group here that if we go the route of having a weather station, there's equipment we can get now that will automatically record data. Better yet, some of the equipment will actually automatically trans data. So essentially everything gets set up automatically. A person occasionally checks to make sure the equipment is working correctly and maintain it. But other than that, you can be transmitting data every so many minutes or hours or days and store that in the cloud. And that data set then becomes accessible to any stakeholders who would like to let use it.
Would that be a rain cloud?
That's one way to put it.
I had said tipping rain gauge, but that's actually old technology now. I think that now, and I don't know how expensive they are, but the Weather Service uses gauges that measure the weight of the water that gets continuously measure the weight of the water that's collected and turn that into inches per minute, 0.002 inches per minute, stuff like that, which is really neat if that's an affordable thing.
I wonder, to Jeff's point, Ned, if you might not already have something with Neil's watershed project that he's got going on. He's got some sensors there, pressure sensors, I think was what you're talking about, Jeff.
Well, yeah, but I think these are, I don't know whether the pressure sensor that you would use in a stream is sensitive enough to measure. Consider that you have a bucket that's getting some rainwater and you're putting a millimeter on the bottom of it, and you want to accurately measure that amount so I'm not sure that it would, but.
This is a Hobo rain gauge data logger. Hobo makes all the, a lot of equipment that's used for continuous monitoring now, but it is a battery powered rainfall data collection, tipping bucket rain gauge. So there's, this kind of thing is out there and you can find it, but.
Oh, it's only 420
something
bucks.
I mean, the tipping bucket would be fine. I just know that there's other stuff that they use.
Yeah, it'd be worth looking into. And then also finding one that's like Bluetooth enabled, or like he said, be able to upload automatically.
Yeah, and if it helps, I'm certainly happy to take a look at some different options and pass along some pricing if that would help, Kirk and Cheryl.
Sure, definitely.
I like looking at mechanical stuff like that anyway.
Yeah, be sure if you find anything, you send it to Jen too, not just us, because.
Perfect. That helps.
Well, it's 3 o'clock, and that's as much as we asked you guys to contribute your time to.
I do have one question, and I guess the best way to do it is send out a doodle poll, but in case anybody for the final, we're only supposed to have 2 meetings, and that's good. So it would be, I'm looking at the week of March 17th, March 15th to 19th, but I don't want to pick a date right now in case we get the plan done earlier and we can push it into earlier in March. So if everybody's okay with a doodle poll, that's how I'll do it, unless anybody has any problems. No? Okay. I think that's it.
Any other questions? Anybody?
No, I would like to say hello to Cricket, and I think I met you once, and Roy is one of my best friends and one of my favorite people. That's all I wanted to say.
He's a county boy.
Yep, he is, and I did meet you, and it's sure nice to see you again.
Yeah.
We could use Roy on our steering committee. Oh, Travis, you still there?
Yes, I am. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who presented the information, and thank you to Cheryl, yourself, and Kirk for getting everybody organized and stuff. It's a huge amount of information, but it was a great listen this afternoon. Thank you.
Again, Travis and Anthony, you probably heard me say that we are going to put this on YouTube, and you can certainly access it. And if you want to watch the whole thing, I know it's probably hard for you. You didn't get to see all the charts and graphs and stuff, so it probably wasn't meaning much to you, but they really did a fantastic job. Jen and Kathy and everybody, Cheryl, they did a great job at doing these charts and graphs that really explain things so much easier to me than just looking at raw numbers. So,
well,
excellent.
The nice thing about video is you can fast forward through the parts you don't want to watch.
I'm just really impressed with how you're getting it organized to have the data point you to the answers or potential solutions. I commend you folks for putting this together, Cheryl, and all the data everybody's gathering, presenting. It's good to see somebody using science to help make informed decisions instead of rash decisions. And
we're not politicians, Ken. We're not politicians, so we don't have
I know, but I know it's nice to see.
Anyway,
Nice to see.
there is, and I know you guys, I'm sure you haven't read all the memos, but I sent them to you. You have them if you want, want to look, especially the graphs, the pie charts and the graphs and the tables and stuff are really, there's just a ton of information on Jen and Whitney and Tara King from NRCS was amazing. She gave me all the stuff from the assessment that Pauline wrote, which I don't think you guys have, but I can actually put that out there too. It's a great big document here. It's all about ag. It's all about ag in the watershed, and it's just amazing. And she was so helpful. She gave me all the graphs and charts and did a lot of work. So I can't thank enough.
We've got a heck of a team. We really do. We are so fortunate. I hope you guys all realize how the DEP and NRC, everybody's just amazing. And anyway, I want to thank everybody
Yes.
for their help. Go ahead, Debbie.
Cheryl,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're not a big Trump fan.
Well, any politician, I don't care if it's Trump or who it is.
Good girl.
I don't trust any of them. So. I trust Dr. Shaw, though, whether people like him or not. I trust Dr. Shaw. But he's not a politician either. He's a scientist. So anyway.
Go ahead, Carol. She was waving goodbye, I think.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you very much for all your help with the lake monitoring stuff too.
My pleasure. You're
Part of
doing
the
a great
team.
job, Cheryl.
Thank you. We'll keep trying. Kirk keeps wanting to go away in the summer, and I tell him we can't. No, can't go away. And we can go away between the 2-week intervals. That's it. That's.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Jen. I
you,
really
everybody.
appreciate it. Hey, good luck with your other projects.
Oh, thank
See
you.
everybody.
Bye, guys. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very
Good
much.
job, Cheryl.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Well, let's see if I can.
Yeah.